I'm Zara Chun, 29, and for as long as I can remember, my older brother David has been the family's golden child when it comes to engineering. At our annual Chun family reunion in San Francisco, I knew this year would be different. For the past 6 months, I'd been quietly working on something that would completely upend everything my family thought they knew about our respective careers. But before I tell you about the moment my brother's arrogance finally caught up with him, let me know in the comments what family dynamics you've had to navigate, and subscribe if you've ever felt overshadowed by a sibling. Growing up in our tight-knit Chinese-American family in Palo Alto meant living under the constant pressure of academic and professional achievement. David, 3 years older than me, had always been the mechanical engineering prodigy. While I was still struggling with basic algebra, he was building complex robotics projects in our garage. Our parents, both immigrants who had worked tirelessly to establish their small electronics import business, saw David as their vindication that they'd successfully raised an American success story. David will be a famous engineer someday, Mom would tell anyone who would listen, beaming with pride as she watched him tinker with motors and circuits. Just like those brilliant men who build rocket ships. When I showed interest in engineering too, it was always framed in relation to David's achievements. Maybe Zara can be engineer's assistant, Dad would say with well-meaning condescension. Support the real engineers. This dynamic crystallized during high school when David won the state engineering competition with an innovative prosthetic design. The local newspaper featured him in a full-page article titled, "Teen Genius Builds Better Tomorrow." Our refrigerator was covered with copies of that article for years. Meanwhile, I was quietly excelling in mathematics and physics, but those achievements seemed insignificant compared to David's mechanical brilliance. When college applications came around, David was accepted to Stanford's mechanical engineering program with a partial scholarship. I chose UC Berkeley for electrical engineering, a decision that prompted subtle family disappointment. Electrical engineering is fine, David had said with that particular tone of condescension he'd perfected. But mechanical engineering is where the real innovation happens. Anyone can work with wires and circuits. The pattern continued through our college years. David's internships at prestigious aerospace companies were celebrated at every family gathering, while my work in semiconductor design was politely acknowledged but never deeply understood. Zara does something with computer chips became my parents' standard explanation to relatives, delivered with the same enthusiasm one might reserve for describing a hobby. The one person who truly saw my potential was my Uncle Henry, my father's younger brother. Uncle Henry had been a research engineer at various tech companies before starting his own consulting firm. He understood the cutting-edge nature of semiconductor design and often encouraged me to pursue my interests despite the family's fixation on David's achievements. "Your work will shape the future in ways people can't even imagine yet," he told me during my junior year when I was feeling particularly overshadowed. Mechanical engineering builds what we can see. Electrical engineering builds what makes everything else possible. After graduation, David landed a job at a prestigious aerospace firm called Aerotech Dynamics, designing aircraft components. His starting salary and company prestige became frequent topics of conversation at family dinners. I joined a small semiconductor startup called Quantum Circuit Solutions, focusing on processor design for mobile devices. While David's work was tangible and easily explained to relatives, my work existed in the microscopic realm of silicon wafers and nanometer-scale circuits. Zara works for some tech company, became the family shorthand, delivered with the same dismissive tone David had perfected. Not like David, who's building actual machines that fly. The startup environment suited me perfectly. I thrived on the rapid prototyping, the collaborative atmosphere, and the bleeding-edge technology we were developing. Within 2 years, I'd been promoted to senior design engineer, leading a team of 6 people working on next-generation mobile processors. But family gatherings remained dominated by David's aerospace stories. He'd regale our relatives with tales of titanium alloys and aerodynamic coefficients, speaking in technical terms that impressed everyone while simultaneously excluding them from the conversation. "The real challenge in engineering," he'd say, looking directly at me, "is working with tangible materials, solving physical problems. Digital stuff is just mathematics. Anyone can learn software." I'd bite my tongue, smile politely, and change the subject. It was easier than trying to explain the complexity of designing circuits that would power millions of devices worldwide. David's confidence in his superiority seemed unshakable, bolstered by our family's constant validation. Everything changed during my fourth year at Quantum Circuit Solutions. Our CEO announced that we'd been acquired by Technocore Industries, one of the world's largest semiconductor manufacturers. The acquisition was based primarily on a revolutionary processor design that would reshape mobile computing, a design I'd led from conception to completion. This technology will be the foundation of next-generation smartphones, tablets, and embedded systems, our CEO explained during the acquisition announcement. Zara Chen's team has created something truly groundbreaking. The acquisition made national tech news, though my name was buried in the technical details that few reporters understood. More significantly, the acquisition meant that our small startup's innovations would now power products made by hundreds of companies worldwide, including, as I discovered while reviewing the client list, aerospace companies that manufactured the flight computers and avionics systems David worked on. It was Uncle Henry who first made the connection. "Zara," he said during a phone call 3 weeks after the acquisition, "do you realize that your processor design is probably going into the flight systems David's company uses?" I'd been so focused on mobile applications that I hadn't considered the broader implications of our technology. A little research confirmed Uncle Henry's suspicion. The aerospace division of Technocore Industries supplied processors to virtually every major aerospace manufacturer in the country, including Aerotech Dynamics. My design wouldn't just be in smartphones and tablets. It would be in aircraft control systems, navigation computers, and communication devices that David's mechanical engineering projects depended on. "Your little sister is literally powering your big brother's flying machines," Uncle Henry chuckled when I shared this discovery. And he has no idea. The irony was delicious, but I decided to keep this information to myself. David would learn the truth eventually, but I wanted to see how long he could maintain his superiority complex while unknowingly depending on my work. The annual Chin family reunion was scheduled for late August at Uncle Henry's spacious home in San Francisco. Our extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends, would gather for a weekend of food, gossip, and inevitable career updates. I'd been dreading these reunions for years, knowing they'd become platforms for David to showcase his achievements while mine were politely ignored. This year felt different. I arrived with my boyfriend Marcus, a fellow engineer who understood both the technical brilliance of my work and the family dynamics that had shaped my career. "Remember," he whispered as we walked up Uncle Henry's front steps, "you've literally revolutionized mobile computing. Don't let anyone make you feel small." The reunion was already in full swing when we arrived. The familiar sounds of Mandarin and English mixing together filled the house, punctuated by children's laughter and the clattering of mahjong tiles. I spotted David immediately, holding court in the living room while showing off photos of the aircraft components he'd been working on. "These titanium brackets," he was explaining to a captivated audience of cousins and family friends, "require precision manufacturing to tolerances of less than 1,000th of an inch. One miscalculation, and the entire aircraft system fails." Aunt Linda nodded appreciatively. "So technical. No wonder you need years of training." David spotted me and waved me over.
"Zara,
"Come tell everyone about your computer work." The casual dismissal in his tone was unmistakable, reducing years of semiconductor innovation to computer work. I forced a smile and joined the group, Marcus beside me. "David was just explaining his aerospace engineering," Cousin Jennifer said politely. "What exactly do you do with computers, Zara?" Before I could answer, David jumped in. "Zara designs computer chips for phones and tablets. It's basically programming, but she works for a big corporation now after her startup got bought out." The way he said "bought out" made it sound like a failure rather than a successful acquisition. I felt the familiar frustration rising but caught Uncle Henry's eye across the room. He gave me a subtle wink, and I remembered that he knew the truth about my work's significance. "Actually," I said calmly, "I design processors that power various computing systems. The work is quite complex." David laughed good-naturedly. Everything's complex until you understand the fundamentals. That's the difference between mechanical and electrical engineering. When I design something, you can see it, touch it, understand how it works physically. Digital stuff is just abstract mathematics. Marcus tensed beside me, but I placed a calming hand on his arm. Different types of engineering solve different problems, I said diplomatically. That's what makes collaboration possible. True, David agreed, but there's a hierarchy of difficulty. Anyone can learn to manipulate electrons and circuits. It takes real engineering skill to work with materials, physics, thermodynamics. The stuff that actually makes things move and fly. Uncle Henry had been quietly listening from across the room, but now he approached our group with a peculiar smile on his face. David, he said casually, I'm curious about something. You mentioned the flight computers in your aircraft designs. Do you happen to know what processors they use? David straightened, clearly pleased to demonstrate more technical knowledge. Of course. We use the latest Technocore QC 7000 series processors. They're incredibly advanced, multi-core architecture, specialized for real-time aviation applications. The reliability standards are insane. Interesting. Uncle Henry nodded thoughtfully. And do you know who designed those processors? The question seemed innocent enough, but I noticed Uncle Henry's eyes twinkling with mischief. David shrugged confidently. Some team at Technocore, I assume. They acquired the technology from a smaller company recently. Brilliant engineering work, whoever designed it. The room had grown quieter, sensing something significant in Uncle Henry's line of questioning. Actually, Uncle Henry said, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence, the QC 7000 series was designed by a very talented engineer. Someone you know quite well, in fact. David looked puzzled. What do you mean? I don't know anyone at Technocore. Uncle Henry's smile widened. You don't know anyone at Technocore currently, but you know the person who designed those processors that make your aircraft systems possible. The engineer who led that groundbreaking project. He paused dramatically. Your sister, Zara. The silence that followed was absolute. David's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and dawning comprehension. That's impossible, he finally managed. Zara works on phone chips. Consumer electronics. Not aerospace-grade systems. The same chips, David, I said quietly, finding my voice at last. The QC 7000 series is a modified version of the mobile processor I designed. Technocore adapted it for aerospace applications after they acquired my company. The room seemed to hold its breath. Cousin Jennifer looked between David and me in confusion. Wait, so Zara designed the computers that David's airplanes use? Not just David's planes, Uncle Henry clarified with evident pride. The QC 7000 series is used in aviation systems across the entire industry. Commercial aircraft, military jets, spacecraft navigation systems. Zara's design is literally keeping planes in the air around the world. David's face had gone pale. But you never said, I mean, you work in consumer electronics. I work in processor design, I corrected gently. The applications vary, but the core technology is the same. The chip architecture I developed has been adapted for everything from smartphones to satellite systems. Including, Marcus added supportively, the flight computers that control the aircraft components your brother designs. The implications began sinking in around the room. My parents, who had been quiet during the technical discussion, suddenly looked bewildered. Zara, Mom said slowly, your computer chips are in airplanes? Among other things, yes, I confirmed. The acquisition by Technocore meant that my designs would be used in multiple industries. Aerospace was just one application I hadn't originally considered. Dad turned to David with genuine confusion. But you said mechanical engineering was more important than computer work. David opened and closed his mouth several times, struggling to formulate a response. The confident engineer, who had dominated family conversations for years, suddenly seemed lost for words. I didn't know, he finally admitted, his voice much quieter than usual. I had no idea your work was powering our systems. Why would you know? I asked not unkindly. You've never asked about the details of what I do. You've always assumed it was less important than your work. The truth of this statement hung heavy in the air. Years of dismissive comments and condescending explanations suddenly took on a different meaning. Uncle Henry stepped in to fill the awkward silence. "This is exactly why I love engineering," he said warmly. "Different disciplines working together to create something amazing. David designs brilliant mechanical systems, and Zara designs the electronic brains that make those systems intelligent." "But I've been saying that electrical engineering is easier," David said, the weight of his past statements clearly hitting him. "That anyone can work with circuits." "And I've been letting you say it," I replied, "because it was easier than constantly defending my work or trying to explain why processor design matters." Aunt Linda, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. "So, when David shows us pictures of his airplane parts, he's actually showing us machines that depend on Zara's work to function?" "Essentially, yes," I confirmed. "Modern aircraft are integrated systems. The mechanical components David designs work together with electronic control systems that rely on processors like the ones I develop." The family began buzzing with conversations as the implications sank in. My younger cousin started asking excited questions about how computer chips worked and whether I'd ever designed anything they used in their phones. David remained quiet, clearly processing this fundamental shift in his understanding of our relative roles in engineering. Uncle Henry caught my eye and nodded approvingly. "I think," he announced to the room, "this calls for a proper toast. To engineering collaboration and to recognizing talent wherever it appears." As glasses were raised around the room, David finally looked directly at me. "Zara," he said, his voice subdued, "I owe you an apology. A big one." The conversation that followed was unlike any we'd had as adults. David began asking genuine questions about my work, not to diminish it, but to understand it. I found myself explaining the intricacies of processor architecture, power management, and signal processing to a family that was finally listening with real interest. "The complexity is incredible," David admitted as I described the challenges of designing circuits with billions of transistors. "I had no idea. When you said computer chips, I thought you meant something simple." "Most people do," I said. "It's part of why electrical engineering is often undervalued. The work is invisible, but it makes everything else possible." Mom and Dad listened with growing amazement as the scope of my achievements became clear. "You designed something used in airplanes around the world?" Mom asked, as if she still couldn't quite believe it. "Among other things," I confirmed. "Smartphones, tablets, automotive systems, medical devices. The processor architecture is adaptable." "Why didn't you tell us?" Dad asked, genuine regret in his voice. I considered the question carefully. Because every time I tried to explain my work, someone would change the subject or dismiss it as less important than David's projects. After a while, I stopped trying. The honesty of my answer seemed to affect the entire family. David looked particularly stricken. "I did that, didn't I? I made you feel like your work didn't matter." "You made me feel like I didn't matter," I corrected softly. "At least not as an engineer." Uncle Henry had been watching our exchange with satisfaction. "This is exactly what I hoped would happen," he said. "Not the discomfort, but the honesty. Both of you are brilliant engineers. Different specialties, different approaches, but both essential." As the afternoon progressed, the family dynamic shifted noticeably. David's usual dominance of technical conversations gave way to genuine dialogue. He asked detailed questions about my work, showing real interest in understanding the challenges I faced. When relatives asked about our careers, he made sure to highlight my achievements alongside his own. "Zara's processor designs are used worldwide," he told cousin Michael, "including in the aircraft systems I work on. It's actually incredible how her work enables everything we build in aerospace." The pride in his voice was unmistakable, and for the first time in years, it felt genuine rather than patronizing. During dinner, Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. "I'm sorry, Zara," she said quietly. "We should have asked more questions about your work. We should have understood how important it is." "It's okay, Mom," I replied, though it wasn't entirely true. Years of feeling overlooked don't disappear with a single conversation. No, it's not okay, she insisted. We let David's confidence make us think his work was more important. We should have seen that both our children are brilliant. The conversation with my parents was long overdue, and while it couldn't undo years of feeling overshadowed, it felt like the beginning of a new understanding. Later that evening, as the reunion wound down, David approached me on Uncle Henry's back deck, where I was getting some fresh air. I've been thinking about what Uncle Henry said, he began. About collaboration. Oh, I replied, not sure where this was heading. I want to understand your work better, he said. Really understand it. And I was wondering if maybe you'd be interested in learning more about what I do too. Not because one is more important than the other, but because we're both engineers, and we could probably learn from each other. The offer surprised me. You really want to know about processor design? I really do, he confirmed. And I think you might find aircraft systems design interesting too. We're both solving complex problems, just in different domains. As we talked into the evening, I began to see David differently. Beneath the arrogance and condescension was a brilliant engineer who had simply been operating within the same limited perspective that had shaped our entire family's understanding of our careers. When that perspective shifted, so did he. The following weeks brought a series of conversations that gradually rebuilt our relationship on a more equal footing. David began referring colleagues to me when they had questions about embedded systems, and I started appreciating the mechanical engineering challenges he faced in his aerospace work. 3 months after the reunion, David called with an unusual request. I've been selected to lead a project developing next-generation flight control systems, he said. The mechanical design is straightforward, but the electronic integration is beyond my expertise. Would you consider consulting on the processor requirements? The collaboration that followed was revelatory. Working together, we combined David's mechanical engineering expertise with my processor design knowledge to create something neither of us could have achieved alone. The flight control system we developed won industry recognition and led to further collaborative projects. More importantly, it established a new dynamic between us. David's confidence in his abilities remained, but it was no longer built on diminishing mine. He began introducing me at professional events as my brilliant sister, the processor design engineer, with obvious pride rather than reluctant acknowledgement. Our parents, too, adapted to this new understanding. They started asking specific questions about my work and celebrating my achievements with the same enthusiasm they'd always shown for David's. When Technocore featured my work in a major trade publication, Mom framed the article and displayed it prominently in their home office. Uncle Henry, who had orchestrated the revelation at the reunion, watched these changes with satisfaction. Sometimes families need a little shock to break out of old patterns, he told me during one of our regular coffee meetings. You both needed to see each other clearly. The experience taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself and the importance of clear communication in families. For years, I'd allowed David's dominance to go unchallenged, partly because confrontation seemed harder than silence. But silence, as I learned, is often just delayed confrontation with higher stakes. 6 months after the reunion, David and I were invited to speak together at an engineering conference about interdisciplinary collaboration. Standing on stage beside my brother, explaining how mechanical and electrical engineering combine to create modern aerospace systems, I felt the satisfaction of finally being seen for who I really was. Engineering is fundamentally collaborative, David told the audience during our presentation. I used to think mechanical engineering was more important than other disciplines. I was wrong. My work creates the physical framework, but Zara's processors create the intelligence that makes those frameworks functional. It was a public acknowledgement of something our family had finally learned in private, that different forms of expertise are complementary, not competitive. That success isn't a zero-sum game where one person's achievements diminish another's. The reunion had been a turning point, but the real change came in the months of honest conversation that followed. David and I learned to see each other as allies rather than competitors, collaborators rather than rivals. Our parents learned to celebrate both our achievements without comparing them. Most importantly, I learned that my work had value regardless of whether others recognized it. The processors I designed were powering systems around the world, enabling everything from communication to transportation to exploration. David's recognition of that fact was validating, but it wasn't necessary for the work itself to matter. Today, David and I maintain both our professional collaboration and our rebuilt personal relationship. We consult on each other's projects when our expertise overlaps, and we've learned to appreciate the different challenges we each face in our respective fields. Our family gatherings have become genuinely collaborative rather than competitive. David still talks about his mechanical engineering work with passion, but now he also asks questions and listens to answers. I share my achievements without apologizing for their complexity or importance. The dynamic that defined our childhood, the brilliant older brother and the overlooked younger sister, has been replaced by something healthier. Two successful engineers who happen to be siblings, each excellent in their own domain, each capable of learning from the other. Sometimes it takes a dramatic revelation to break patterns that have persisted for decades. In our case, Uncle Henry's simple question about processor design changed everything, forcing our family to confront assumptions that had shaped our relationships for years. The truth, when it finally emerged, didn't diminish David's achievements. Instead, it revealed that both of us had been succeeding in ways our family hadn't fully understood. Recognition of my work didn't make his less important. It simply made our family's understanding more complete and accurate. For anyone dealing with similar family dynamics, my advice is this: don't wait for a dramatic revelation to speak up for yourself. Your achievements have value regardless of whether others recognize them immediately. But clear communication about what you do and why it matters can help those who care about you understand and celebrate your success. Sometimes the most important engineering we do isn't with circuits or machines, but with relationships. Breaking down old patterns and building new ones requires the same patience, precision, and collaborative spirit that we bring to our technical work. The family that once saw David as the only real engineer now understands that engineering excellence comes in many forms. And both David and I are better engineers and better siblings for having learned that lesson together. Have you ever had a moment where your family's understanding of your achievements completely shifted? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more content about navigating complex family dynamics while building a successful career. Remember, your work has value whether others recognize it immediately or not, but clear communication can help them understand why it matters. The notification chime on my phone pulled me away from the complex circuit diagrams spread across my home office desk. Breaking: Technocore's revolutionary QC 9000 processor powers first autonomous commercial flight, read the headline from TechWeek. I smiled, remembering when seeing my work in the news used to feel surreal. 2 years had passed since that pivotal family reunion in San Francisco, and the trajectory of my career had accelerated in ways I never could have anticipated. The collaboration with David on flight control systems had evolved into something much larger, a joint venture between Technocore and Aerotech Dynamics that was reshaping how aircraft intelligence systems were designed. Zara. Marcus called from the kitchen of our new San Jose home. Your interview with IEE Spectrum is live. I minimized the technical specifications I'd been reviewing and opened the article. There, under the headline, "The Mind Behind the Machine: How Zara Chen's Processors Are Revolutionizing Aerospace," was a photo of me standing next to the prototype of our latest autonomous navigation system. The article began, "When Dr. Zara Chen says her processors think, she's not speaking metaphorically." Dr. Chen. The title still felt new. 6 months ago, Technocore had fast-tracked me through their executive PhD program, recognizing that my innovations had moved far beyond traditional engineering into the realm of artificial intelligence integration. My dissertation on adaptive processing architecture for real-time autonomous systems had been published in 3 major journals simultaneously. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Saw the IEEE article. Mom just called, crying happy tears. She's framing it next to your MIT Technology Review cover story. Face with tears of joy. The MIT Technology Review cover had been another milestone. 35 innovators under 35, And I'd made the list not just for processor design, but for what they called pioneering the integration of mechanical and electrical engineering through intelligent collaboration. David had been quoted extensively in that article, explaining how our joint approach was creating aircraft that don't just fly, but think. Another buzz, this time from Uncle Henry. Board meeting went well. They approved the new R&D facility. You'll have 50 engineers reporting to you by year-end. Proud of you, kiddo. The R&D facility was perhaps what I was most excited about. TechnoCore had given me carte blanche to build a team focused on next-generation autonomous systems. The facility would be located equidistant between San Jose and David's Aerotech campus, designed specifically to facilitate the kind of cross-disciplinary collaboration that had proven so successful. I glanced at the photo on my desk, the whole Chin family at last month's reunion, but this time it was different. David and I stood together, both holding awards from the International Engineering Consortium for our collaborative work. Mom and Dad flanked us, beaming with equal pride. Uncle Henry stood behind us with his hand on both our shoulders, looking like the proud architect of a plan that had worked better than even he had imagined. The irony wasn't lost on me that the overlooked little sister was now being courted by universities, corporations, and government agencies. Just last week, I turned down offers from Google, Apple, and NASA, each wanting to build entire departments around my work. TechnoCore had countered by essentially letting me build my own company within their structure, with David's team as my first major client and partner. But perhaps the most satisfying change was the simplest one. When relatives asked what I did for a living, Mom no longer said something with computer chips. Now she said, with unmistakable pride, Zara designs the brains that make airplanes think for themselves. She's revolutionizing how machines understand the world. The complexity of explaining my work had actually decreased as its impact had increased. I make machines smart was usually sufficient, though I enjoyed the deeper technical discussions when people were genuinely curious. My laptop chimed with a video call request. David's face appeared on the screen, wearing his usual post-flight grin. Just landed the prototype back at Edwards, he said. The QC-9000 handled the entire approach sequence autonomously. Your baby is thinking faster than our pilots can react. Any issues with the new neural pathway algorithms? I asked, switching into technical mode.
None.
It's actually anticipating turbulence better than our weather prediction systems. The mechanical stress predictions are spot on. He paused, shaking his head in amazement. 2 years ago, I thought I understood aircraft design. Now I realize I was just building really sophisticated remote control toys. We spent 20 minutes reviewing flight data, David explaining mechanical stress patterns while I analyzed processing loads. The conversation was technical, collaborative, and completely natural, a far cry from the tense family dynamics that had defined our relationship for decades. Oh, before I forget, David added as we wrapped up, Sarah wants to know if you and Marcus are free for dinner Sunday. She's making that Thai curry you loved last time. David's wife, Sarah, had become an unexpected ally in our family's transformation. As a software engineer herself, she'd immediately grasped the significance of my work and had spent the past 2 years helping David understand the computational complexity behind what I did. Their daughter Emma, now 4, had started telling people that her Aunt Zara makes airplane brains, which was perhaps the most accurate simple description anyone had come up with. We'll be there, I confirmed. Marcus is excited to see Emma's latest robot project. After ending the call, I returned to my circuit diagrams, but my mind wandered to the path that had brought me here. The girl who'd once sat silently through family gatherings while her achievements were dismissed now found herself at the center of conversations about the future of autonomous systems. The computer work that had been casually diminished was now powering everything from smartphones to spacecraft. Tomorrow, I'd be presenting to Congress about the implications of AI-integrated transportation systems. Next month, I'd keynote the International Aerospace Engineering Conference. The following quarter, our autonomous flight systems would begin commercial testing with major airlines. But tonight, I was content to sit in my home office, designing the next generation of thinking machines, knowing that my family finally understood not just what I did, but why it mattered. The The phone chimed again. This time it was a message from a young woman named Lisa Kim. "Hi, Dr. Chen. I'm a junior at Berkeley studying electrical engineering. My family keeps telling me I should switch to something more practical. Your story gives me hope. Thank you for showing us that our work matters." I smiled and typed back, "Your work absolutely matters, Lisa. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And if they don't understand it yet, keep building until they can't ignore it. Sometimes the most important engineering we do is changing minds." As I hit send, I realized that perhaps this was what mattered most, not the awards or the recognition, but the knowledge that somewhere another young engineer wouldn't have to wait for a dramatic family reunion to be seen for who she really was. The future was thinking, and I was teaching it how.